ever notice how one small moment can change everything? How helping someone move a box can spiral into something you never saw coming? Before I get into this mess of a story, please don't forget to subscribe, like my story, and comment what you think about it. Trust me, you will want to follow this one. I'm Simon Whitmore, 51 years old, unemployed, and living what I thought was a perfectly fine life. I inherited my house from my late parents and casually work odd jobs to get by day, moving furniture, yard work, whatever pays enough to cover groceries and utilities without worries. Wake up whenever I feel like it, check if anyone needs work done, maybe watch some TV, eat whatever's in the fridge. Rinse and repeat. I wasn't unhappy, just existing. Then one morning, while drinking coffee on my front porch, I saw the moving truck pull up across the street. I watched them unload boxes and furniture, curious about who was moving into the place. That's when she stepped out of her car. Young woman with long blonde hair, directing the movers with this confidence that caught my attention immediately. I found myself walking over before I'd even made the decision. "Need a hand?" I called out. She turned and smiled. "That would be amazing, actually. I'm Natasha." "Simon," I replied, already reaching for a box. I spent the next few hours helping carry her things. Natasha Redford, 22 years old, fitness trainer, just gotten a job at the local gym. She was grateful for the help, friendly without being overly personal. We talked while working, nothing deep, just the usual moving day conversation. When we finished, she thanked me and offered to buy me lunch sometime as payment. I brushed it off, told her I was just being neighborly. That night, I kept thinking about her. Not romantically, but something else. She had this energy, this purpose that I hadn't seen in anyone before. I found myself wondering what her daily routine looked like, what she ate for breakfast, how she spent her evenings. Questions that should have been random curiosity, but felt more important somehow. The next morning, I positioned myself by my living room window with my coffee. Her house was perfectly visible from there. I told myself I was just keeping an eye on the neighborhood, being a good neighbor. When lights came on around 7, I watched. When she left for work in her car around 8, I noted the time. This became part of my morning routine. Coffee, window, watching. I learned her schedule without really trying. She left for work around the same time each day, came home in the early evening, sometimes went out again on weekends. Normal stuff, but I found myself invested in these patterns. After a few days of window watching, I decided to check out where she worked. Just curiosity, really. The gym was about 15 minutes away, and I drove there one afternoon. I parked across the street and waited. When her car pulled into the parking lot, I put on my dark hoodie and walked closer. Through the large front windows, I could see her working with clients, demonstrating exercises, laughing and talking with everyone. She moved with complete confidence, gave each person her full attention. I stood there for over an hour, just watching her interact with people. She never noticed me standing outside. Why would she? I was just another person on the sidewalk, someone walking past. I kept my hood up, stayed at a distance, and observed how she handled her work, how she talked to people, what made her smile. This became my new routine. Every few days, I'd drive to the gym and watch her work. I learned which clients she worked with regularly, what exercises she preferred teaching, how she handled difficult situations. The more I watched, the more I wanted to understand what made her tick. Eventually, just watching from outside wasn't enough. I needed to understand her life better, see how she lived when no one was watching. I remembered helping her move boxes through the back door when the front entrance was blocked. One afternoon, while she was at work, I walked around to her backyard,
and tried the back door. It opened. I stepped inside carefully, listening for any sounds. The house was empty, exactly as I had expected. I walked through slowly, taking in how she organized her space. Everything was clean and purposeful. The kitchen had healthy food, fresh vegetables, protein powders lined up neatly. Her living room had yoga mats rolled up in the corner, resistance bands hanging on hooks, fitness magazines stacked on the coffee table. Then I saw the leather journal sitting next to the magazines. I opened it and started reading. Daily entries about everything: what she ate, her workout routines, thoughts about clients, goals she was working toward. She wrote about missing her family, about building a life in a new city, about wanting to help people feel confident about themselves. Page after page of her thoughts, her inner life laid out completely.
I read for hours, absorbing every detail. When I heard a car in the driveway, I quickly closed the journal, put it back exactly where I'd found it, and slipped out through the back door. My heart was pounding, but I felt more alive than I had in years. The next day, I went back, and the day after that. While she was at work, I'd let myself in and read her latest entries, learning more about how she thought, what mattered to her, what her daily experiences were like. I was careful never to move anything, never to leave any trace I'd been there. I just read and learned. That's when I started noticing the changes in myself. Small things at first. I'd catch myself standing straighter, moving differently. I started eating the same foods she wrote about in her journal. I began doing basic stretches in the morning because she mentioned doing yoga. Without really thinking about it, I was adopting her habits, her routines, her way of approaching each day. But it was more than just habits. When I looked in the mirror, something was different. My face seemed younger, my skin clearer, my hair looked healthier. My body felt different when I moved. At first, I thought it was just the better diet and exercise, but as time passed, I realized something else was happening. My obsession with understanding Natasha was changing me physically. One morning, she wrote in her journal about plans to meet friends in the city for dinner. I decided to follow her, see what her social life looked like. I put on my usual dark hoodie and jeans and drove to the restaurant she'd mentioned. I found a spot across the street where I could watch without being obvious. She arrived and walked toward the restaurant to meet her friends. I followed her at a distance. When I was walking through the urban area, I pulled out my phone and caught sight of my reflection in the screen. I stopped, completely, staring at what I saw. The person in the reflection looked nothing like the Simon who had started watching Natasha weeks ago. My face had completely changed. Younger features, clearer skin, different bone structure. My hair was longer and healthier. Even my posture and the way I moved had transformed. I looked exactly like her. Standing there on the sidewalk, I realized what was happening. My obsession with knowing everything about Natasha, with understanding her completely, was literally transforming me into her. The more I learned about her habits and thoughts, the more I applied that knowledge to my own life, the more my body changed to match hers. I followed her for another hour, watching her interact with friends, noting how she laughed, what she ordered to eat, how she responded to different conversations. Everything she did, I was mentally cataloging, adding to my understanding of who she was. And with each new piece of information, I felt the transformation continuing. When I got home that night, I looked at myself in my bathroom mirror. The changes were undeniable. I was becoming her, not just in behavior, but in physical form. Instead of being terrified, I was fascinated. This was the most incredible thing that had ever happened to me. Over the following days, I stopped going to the gym to watch her work. Instead, I focused on spending time in her house while she was away. I'd sleep in her bed, feeling how the mattress and pillows shaped around my changing body. I'd shower in her bathroom, using her soaps and shampoos, experiencing how they felt on my increasingly feminine skin. Most importantly,
I started wearing her clothes. Her workout clothes fit perfectly now. Her casual clothes, her jeans, her sweaters, everything fit like it was made for my transformed body. I'd spend entire afternoons dressed as her, looking at myself in her mirrors, walking around her house, and experiencing what it felt like to live as Natasha. I was absolutely delighted with what was happening. This transformation was giving me a life I'd never imagined possible. But while I was enjoying this new existence, I noticed Natasha becoming anxious whenever she was home. She'd check locks twice, look around nervously, examine things carefully before using them. I realized she was picking up on signs that someone else had been in her space. Her clothes would be washed and folded when she'd left them in the hamper. Her bed would be made when she'd left in a rush. Her fridge would be restocked with exactly the same items she usually bought, but she couldn't remember going shopping. I read in her journal that she was feeling like someone was watching her, like someone was living in her house. The anxiety was building every day. She wrote about not feeling safe, about considering moving somewhere else. Then one morning, I read the entry that changed everything. She was moving out. She'd quit her job despite her employer trying to convince her to stay. She'd found a new place and would be gone within 2 weeks. The thought of losing this connection, this transformation, filled me with panic. Before leaving her house that day, I went through her closet and took several outfits. Not many, just a few she wouldn't miss immediately. Having her clothes felt like maintaining the connection, even if she wasn't there anymore.
During those final 2 weeks, while she was preparing to move, I was preparing too. I put my house up for sale online, handling everything remotely so I wouldn't have to meet with anyone in person. Since I now looked exactly like Natasha, I was able to get duplicate identification documents in her name. It was surprisingly easy when you look identical to someone. When the sale of my house went through, I used that money to contact her landlord and buy the place she was renting. From everyone else's perspective, Simon had moved away and sold his house, while Natasha had decided to buy her rental property instead of moving. The day she actually moved out, I watched from my living room window as the moving truck loaded up her belongings. But when I looked at my reflection in the window glass, I barely recognized myself. The 51-year-old Simon who had lived in this house was completely gone. In his place was an exact copy of Natasha, who had just moved out of the house across the street. But I wasn't done yet. Using the clothes I'd taken from her, I drove to the gym where she used to work. I walked in wearing a light blue top, approached the manager, and told them I'd made a mistake leaving, that I'd learned my lesson about making impulsive decisions. They were thrilled to have me back and didn't ask many questions. Within days, I'd completely erased every trace of Simon's existence and established myself as Natasha living independently. I had her job, her house, her entire life, but living it as someone who looked exactly like her. Tonight, I went for a run around the neighborhood. I was wearing one of her outfits, a brown leopard print sports bra and matching shorts that fit my transformed body perfectly. As I stretched afterward, watching the sunset, I thought about how completely my life had changed. At this point, who's the real Natasha? I have all her memories from reading her journal. I know her preferences, her habits, her way of thinking about everything. I make the same choices she would make because I understand her completely. My obsession with learning everything about her led to me becoming her in the most literal way possible. The original Natasha is somewhere else now, starting a new life in a new place. And I'm here, living the life she left behind, but living it as her.
What started as simple curiosity about helping a neighbor move turned into the most complete transformation imaginable. There's more to this story about how I've been living as her since then, but that's a story for another time.
Hi! I see that you watched this video until the end. If you want to watch more stories, please click the video on the bottom left of the screen. If you want to watch the members only part 2, please click the video on the bottom right side of the screen. Please support the channel by subscribing, liking, and commenting what you think about it below. Cheers!